We saw this quite horrible attack on a football pitch yesterday from Hezbollah. It was, the Israeli army said, a missile, a rocket, not a UAV, not an aircraft of any type. They said a rocket was launched and landed there where children mostly were playing. It was next to also a playground. They said that it was a Falak 1 rocket, which is Iranian made, no surprise, and only Hezbollah has them. So that's how they know. They say that this was a strike by Hezbollah. And it's important to remember that this isn't actually the beginning of the tensions between Israel and Lebanon in the north. On October the 7th, when Hamas stormed the border of Israel and Gaza and raped and murdered and kidnapped so many people, Hezbollah joined in the north straight away. Yeah. So there was no so-called provocation from Israel. Instead, Hezbollah decided that it was going to join this axis, this Iranian axis, at Israel's potentially weakest moment, when it was trying to pick itself up after that October the 7th attack. And it's been launching rockets and UAVs towards Israel since then. There have been 22 fallen soldiers in the north for Israel, 23 civilians killed, including those 11 yesterday, over 340 UAVs, those are drones, launched at Israel, and over 6,400 projectiles launched at Israel. So we don't hear a lot about that in the Western media. Here in the UK, we hear virtually none of it on the news. And when something like this happens, we see headlines coming out straight away from the BBC, the emphasis being on Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. It really shows, I think, a twisting and a warping of what's going on in Israel. And many in Israel, when I'm there covering this, been back and forth since October, are utterly dismayed at the fact that this seems to be a war that's being misrepresented internationally. Iran has a messianic cult effectively running it. Part of its ideology is to destroy Israel. This isn't a secret. It declares it at any given opportunity. It's hurtling towards nuclear weapons capability. Yep. And even without nuclear weapons, it's wreaking havoc in the region and around the world by using these proxies like Hezbollah and like Hamas in Gaza and the Houthis in Yemen. They are directly attacking Israel, killing civilians. As you say, these mostly Druze people who were killed yesterday. It's time, I think, that Britain, the British government, actually bucked up its ideas and decided to support Israel much more strongly. I know that many people watching the footage coming out of Gaza feel that this is a cut and dried case of an oppressor on the part of Israel somehow punishing unfairly Palestinians in Gaza, but it really is nothing of the sort. It's a total inversion of the truth. The Israeli army is really operating in uniquely difficult circumstances, and the war in the north is just going to hot up. Israel has already retaliated for that strike, and so it should, because no sovereign state can undergo that kind of ongoing, sustained attack from a terrorist army like Hezbollah, which is far more equipped than Hamas ever was. So the war there will be all the worse. I think this is absolutely something that the West needs to get behind, and we're seeing it becoming more and more part of the conversation.
Hezbollah is a direct force under the auspices of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the elite group of soldiers or ruling class who lead Iran underneath the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei and his bunch of cronies there. The second thing that was significant overnight is that Donald Trump opened his latest rally with a determined speech, opening up his whole appearance by condemning this attack and how he supported Israel in this position. And yet we have seen the new Labour government, Jonathan, about face on Rishi Sunak's very, very consistent position on the Israel-Iran war. Let's call it that, because this is the Iran-Israel war. Whatever's going on,
well, I'd say, Johnny, it's not
Gaza,
even just Israel-Iran war. It's the West and Iran. Israel is at the front line of this.
Yes, but as in the region, we'd call it the Iran-Israel war.
I think Netanyahu was right when he spoke in America in that rousing speech to point out that Israel is effectively fighting this not just for itself and for its own safety, but as the sort of forefront of democracy against these theocratic forces. The theocratic regime in Iran will not stop at Israel. Once it's wiped out Israel, its next statement is death to America. I think it's definitely something we need to worry about. And you're right, you're alluding to the fact that Sir Keir Starmer has opened up this diplomatic row now with Benjamin Netanyahu because there was this move to try to get the ICC, the International Criminal Court, to issue arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, the leader of democratic Israel, as a war criminal. Britain, under the Tories in their dying days of government, had put in an official objection on technical grounds, because actually, technically speaking with legal experts, it's quite dubious that the ICC, which doesn't really have jurisdiction in this case anyway, should be doing this, as well as being morally and ethically utterly corrupt. Now, the Labour government came in, and of course they're really torn because they have a large part of their voter base which is very anti-Israel and doesn't like the idea of the British government trying to stop that happening. And so they've twisted and turned and ummed and ahed, but now it's come out that they have indeed decided to remove that objection that the Tories had put in place. So they are not going to stand in the way of this ICC process should it go ahead. And I think that comes on the back of David Lammy as well, deciding to refund UNRWA, the United Nations Works and Relief Agency, which did provide aid and jobs and an awful lot of civilian infrastructure for the people of Gaza. It is the UN's only agency dedicated to one specific refugee population, the Palestinians. All other refugee populations in the entire world are dealt with together. Only one has its own agency. Indeed, only one set of refugees in the entire world is able to pass down forever through the patrilineal line the status of refugee. Even if you're settled in a new country, you can pass down Palestinian refugee status, which means it's an ever-growing refugee population.
Like the former Adidas model who was fired for being an anti-Semite but promoting Adidas shoes.
Right. And I think that...
Forgotten her name, because I always forget baddies' names.
So I think you mean Bella Hadid?
Bella Hadid.
Yes. So I think the issue is that Lammy, having decided to refund UNRWA, the reason funding was removed, many countries removed funding, was because Israel proved that many of those UNRWA workers, many people directly involved with UNRWA, had been part of the October the 7th attacks and also had been affiliated with members of Hamas, and that there was a rot at the core of UNRWA because basically they said it was operating as the sort of polite face of Hamas. So countries rightly withdrew their funding, but now David Lammy has restored that. Keir Starmer has decided to remove the British objection to the ICC pushing forward with these arrest warrants. This is all not looking good for the British government's position on Israel, and not looking good for Israel in that respect.
There is a diplomatic attempt to bring together this war into some kind of new settlement which will redress the balance, and that is, I mentioned this in the first hour, that we are on the edge, and this is not a joke, this is not an exaggeration, we are on the edge of a potential new nuclear arms race which we in the West are not entirely in control of, and that is that Iran is reported to be 3 weeks away from being able to enrich their uranium from 80% to 100% capacity, which could supply us with 5 hostile nuclear warheads. I talked to Major Andrew Fox in my last podcast, Jonny Gould's Jewish State, and he said, why are Iran not enriching uranium? And the answer to that was that Russia and China are telling them, don't do that, because if you do that, then there will be an extreme response from NATO, from the United States, from Israel. So cool it, man. Don't do that right now. Now, the diplomatic part of this, which is something that I'm wondering about, and this is difficult with the vacuum of power in the United States with Biden at home in Rehovot, and wherever he lives, and not being exactly in control, and Kamala campaigning to be the next president, Donald Trump understanding it implicitly, is that Saudi Arabia have said repeatedly, if Iran have nuclear weapons, we need nuclear weapons. And in order to have nuclear weapons like that, they need the umbrella of the United States to support them. And in order for that to happen, and that would be a most unusual nuclear situation to have been created, they would have to recognize Israel and be part of a new partner in the Abraham Accords. So there is some possibility that some good, some order can come out of the disaster of this recent war.
That is what, and that's what Benjamin Netanyahu was alluding to as well when he was in America giving that speech. He talked about the Abraham Accords, which took place under the Trump administration when Israel made, let's say, peace or good relations with various Arab countries, and that was always due to be extended. Saudi Arabia, of course, would be the big prize in that. But I think that also he introduced a new angle on that, which was he said he wanted there to be an alliance, an Abraham alliance of states which will fight against this Iranian threat, which is one of the biggest to the world at the moment, certainly one of the biggest to Israel. And I think that his vision there that he was laying out before the Americans was that in the same way that many countries came together when Iran directly attacked Israel a few months ago, they launched over 300 projectiles between UAVs, drones, and ballistic missiles.
Including Jordan and Saudi, by the way.
Right. So we saw these Arab countries joining Israel, joining the West. Britain got involved, shot down, I believe, some of the missiles. America, of course, got involved. And it demonstrated, and France, it demonstrated this united front against Iran. I think we're going to need to see more of that. It doesn't necessarily need to be as a result of a specific Iranian direct attack on Israel, though that was unprecedented at that moment. This allyship, this new union of countries needs in a way to come together almost more formally, because I think just doing so gives the signal to Iran, don't you think, that it's going to have a tougher fight if it does choose to go ahead. The only problem with all of that is, by the way, that just to reiterate, the Iranians are rational actors in choosing how they behave, but their ultimate goal is utterly irrational to most of us, because it's based on what seems like an utterly crazy version of Islam, which believes in the hidden imam who needs to reappear at the end of days. And that will happen, something they want to happen, when there is mass chaos and destruction. So the closer they get to mass chaos and destruction, the more religiously they feel that this is actually fulfilling the prophecy. And that means that even the threat of this military action may not be something that deters them.
Yes, and they see October the 7th as the launch of the start of the end of days. That is the people who we are dealing with. And now the Sunday Telegraph is positively beaming on the front page. I do like it, and they're definitely kids. If you're watching on TV, you can see our first medalists from Paris 2024, and there's this thing that kids do these days, you know, on Instagram. They either do a blowy kissy, or if they've won a medal, they bite it like it's a piece of Cadbury's chocolate. And they have true to form been that, because they are 24 and 22. Yasmin Harper and Scarlett Mew Jensen, aged 22, they've won bronze. So many congratulations to
There's
Team
this one
GB.
as well, you know. Do you know what that is?
What's that mean?
It's a heart.
All right, so I thought, you see, heart. I thought
you see, you're old school now.
Well, my kids must be old school.
Heart, like that.
The heart.
Heart, you see.
Oh, you're with the kids, man. So, like, if you're not watching on TV, it's like your thumb and your index.
I say marry young, and you get all the front line on this stuff.
Jonathan showing off yet again there. And right, okay. So look, so the Sunday Telegraph. Right, we'll go on to this, the front page, because the Prime Minister is talking to Spain over youth-free movement. Starmer is accused of a U-turn after publicly rejecting EU-wide mobility scheme back in April. So the Prime Minister, hardly surprising, you get into power and then this is what he wanted to do. We all kind of knew he was up for this. He's discussed a free movement detail for young people with the Spanish Prime Minister. Pedro Sanchez made the case for a UK-Spain agreement allowing Spain's youngish youngest people to live in the UK in private talks at Blenheim Palace on July the 18th, and I can hear, never, no, I wasn't invited. So Keir is understood not to have rejected the proposal and said he would consider it along with other discussion points. His private openness to the idea is in contrast with his public position in April, surprise, surprise, when Labour rejected an EU-wide youth mobility deal floated by Brussels, because that would involve 27 other countries, not just Spain.
Of course, everybody sort of half expected a Keir Starmer Labour Party to try and undo bits of Brexit, even now, even after that resounding indication from the British population in the largest ever popular mandate for something. It was that people wanted to leave the European Union. And let's not forget that one of the main reasons people cited at the time, or at least one of the main talking points, was free movement. People didn't like the idea that people can come into the country regardless of their skill set, employability, anything, that they could just come here because they were European. Of course, the Tories royally messed that up even once we took back control, and they didn't really take control of immigration into the country. But regardless, I think to introduce free movement as a concept is something that was so unpopular among those Brexit voters who voted to leave that it seems really like a punch in the face to take it back now, even with just one country, with Spain. There'd have to be a really strong argument, a strong reason for that. I personally believe in immigration, of course I do. I'm the son of immigrants, but I would say that people, when they come here, in fact, I'm married to an immigrant, people come here, they need to have the ability to work, to contribute to society, and most of all, to integrate into British society. I think that's been the problem all along. And I think that in terms of
pluralism, not multiculturalism.
I think that's right.
Isn't that what we're talking about here? That's what we're talking about.
I think to live in a multi-ethnic country like ours is an absolute privilege and an honour, and it enriches society. But precisely because when it's done successfully, people become British, and Britain does absorb a bit of the different cultures that join it. And lots of countries get it right, lots of countries get it wrong. But I think that that was one of the big motivating factors of the Leave vote, and I think it might be something Keir Starmer will want to think about very carefully before he decides to undertake anything called free movement from absolutely anywhere. Free movement means you're not really judging the individuals coming in and out from a specific place, as far as I understand it, on the actual criteria of their case. And I think that's really the problem that was at the heart of people who wanted to leave because of immigration.
And your next story is a simple one, and that is that when the world's most powerful man decides to, I'm a bit bored now, I'm going to put on my Twitter, or I'm going to call it X, and I'm going to tweet something that's going to reach 47 million people. It makes headlines around the world all the time. And this is Elon Musk, of course. And he was among the critics after Paris's opening ceremony had drag queens parodying the Last Supper in tableau. Now, had Claire Muldoon on yesterday, who is a practicing Catholic. And I joined in as well, because, of course, she was offended by it being the Last Supper. But, of course, we know, don't we, Jonathan, that in fact it was also a Passover dinner. It was the first night, or the only night as it was. It was a Seder night, wasn't it? So, they're parodying. We agreed together that, there's one thing, égalité, éternité, liberté, and a cup of tea. That's fine, but don't mock religion as well, and they were mocking it, weren't they not?
It's funny
with the
because
drag queens. It looked a bit like basically BBC One on a Saturday night.
We've always thought of France as having this separation between religion and everything else, and yet here they were openly mocking religion. And I think that the interesting thing about this is they wouldn't have done it for some other religions, would they?
No.
I wasn't expecting a tableau involving Muhammad and drag queens.
Otherwise, all the creative directors would be in hiding from today.
And while there is this upheaval, this outcry about this, not least from Elon Musk, but also from France's Conference of Bishops, they said the ceremony unfortunately included scenes of derision and mockery of Christianity, which we deplore very deeply. I mean, that's quite strong words coming from bishops. But not one French embassy around the world was attacked. Not one bishop issued a decree that the people involved should be killed for this action, and that should be carried out by ordinary Christians around the world on the street. There was not one deranged death call for the people that did this. And I believe that we should be able to criticize all religions, especially because religions are, at their heart, philosophical thought systems for how we live our lives. Often they involve laws and rules, and if we can't criticize those things, then we've lost our freedoms. We should be respectful, though, and I think a drag act mocking a famous 15th century Leonardo da Vinci painting of Jesus is perhaps tasteless. I personally have my own dislike of drag act. I consider it to be a bit like woman face. We don't do blackface anymore. We don't make comedy caricatures of black people in entertainment. I'm not sure why we think it's acceptable to do the same for women. I appreciate I am often seen as a humorless Grinch for that, and I also accept that many women don't feel that way about it, so that's why I've always reeled it back in. But so for me it was cheap and tacky anyway.
Yes.
But I think that in terms of attacking a religion, Christianity of all religions as well, such a mainstream religion of Europe, I think this was a massive problem. It was a big mistake, but I am pleased to say that there have been no such death threats and what have you. There has been rigorous debate and criticism, and that's exactly how it should be.
Absolutely. Jonathan Sacerdoti is with me in the studio as we're running through the papers. If you've got any observations, please join in on text 87222 0344 499 1000. And in just a moment, we'll turn to page 13 of the Mail on Sunday and talk about a Scottish island with a very different flavour. A cleric with his own army raises £3 million to create Islamic homeland on Scottish Island, says page 13 of the Mail on Sunday. Jonathan, this is a big story. I'm going to read out the first few lines of this. A firebrand cleric who's been accused of spreading hate has raised more than £3 million to buy a small British island and turn it into his own Islamic state. The Mail on Sunday can reveal that Sheikh Yasser al-Habib, who's 45, who claimed asylum in Britain 20 years ago after fleeing his native Kuwait, and all his followers are in advanced talks to buy the remote Isle of Torsa off the west coast of Scotland. Is this true? Is this an exaggeration? Is this right?
It sounds like a comedy.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it isn't.
Right.
Sheikh Yasser al-Habib, 45, known as the Mullah of Fulma, has raised this £3 million to buy a small British island and turn it into his own Islamic state.
Right.
He wants to have a mosque there. He wants to have an army there, it seems, according to this article. He's training, and he has videos showing him training and doing drills in the grounds of his mosque in Fulma already, and there's a picture of that here. It's quite alarming. It does make you wonder why this sort of thing, even though it seems ridiculous on the one hand, it does highlight a problem that we have in this country, which is we seem particularly partial to giving refuge to people with dreadful associations, dreadful opinions, who appear to be whipping up any kind of social divisions they can, specifically in this case and in some others in the name of extremist Islam. Now imagine if a so-called far-right leader decided he wanted to buy an island, a Scottish island, and turn it into his own state with its own army. In one of his speeches, al-Habib called the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman an animal after she said she may impose restrictions on pro-Gaza marches. He also said after the October the 7th attacks, who among us does not enjoy retaliation of the Zionist enemy? We were all buoyed by this news. It's another alarming example of an extremist. This is somebody that came here 20 years ago after fleeing Kuwait, his native Kuwait, it says here. He claimed asylum here. So it's, I think, very alarming when we see these stories, and some will accuse newspapers like the Mail of looking for these, picking them out and whipping up people's anger about it. But, you know, it's pretty easy to be angry about something like this, because even if the concept and the idea is laughable and stupid, the sentiment behind it is anything but. He says in one 3-minute video, if you want to live free under the banner of the Imam, in a special homeland where you feel everything in it reminds you of the awaited Mahdi. Everything is the sheer homeland support this project. It's not comforting to British people to hear this, and I think that it's about time that we stopped even laughing at things like this.
Yeah, it's not funny. And Mahdi is that's the clue. Mahdi is a direct word connecting him to the Iranian regime.
Exactly.
That is it. Mahdiism comes out of the Ayatollah.
And this man, according to the article, has a long history of all of this as well, and that he is basically constantly attacking people, Sunni Muslims, which again is typical of this particular form of Islam, this Iranian form of Islam that we see. I think that it's time that more people learned a bit more about Islam, I have to say. I urge people to read the Quran and people to study more about Islam. I actually recorded an audiobook of the Quran, would you believe?
Did you really?
I did, yes. I was hired to be the voice of the Quran. They asked me to read it all. I got all the way through all of the recordings. It took me a jolly long time, and then at the last minute they cut me off and all my recordings were ditched. I think they Googled me and discovered they had hired a gay Jew Zionist to be the voice of the Quran, and this didn't go.
Did they think perhaps you were a Muslim?
I think, or did they not worry about it? That, but no, they very much wanted. I actually took my hat off to them. I think they very much wanted a British voice. They specifically hired me to do it on the grounds of my voice. I thought it was a Martin Luther King moment, that I was being judged not by the colour of my skin, but by the dulcet,
the content of your dulcitude.
But it turns out that I think it was a step too far to have that. But either way, what it meant is that I did actually a very slow and considered reading of the Quran, not my only time.
And you were taking it in. It was a form of education.
Absolutely. I think everyone should read it. I think the same as I think everyone should read the Bible, Old and New Testament. I think these are things that are fundamental to our culture. And if there is a story like this one going on, we need to understand the ins and the outs of exactly what it means in Islam, and what Shia Islam is, what Sunni Islam is. And I think it would help people enormously to understand stories like this if they made themselves better educated. It may not be something that anyone really wanted to do, but I don't think we've got much of a choice anymore.
Absolutely. I think we need to have a greater understanding, if not an empathy, but at least an understanding of the different significant parts of the world. That is Jonathan Sacerdoti, and it's been a brilliant early breakfast show. But I have to hand over the reins at 7 o'clock to the breakfast show, and here he is.
Hello.
It's Christo to tell us all about it.
Yes, so I'm unhappy this morning.
Oh no.
I'm rarely happy. But the Chancellor is going to obviously report on these horrific tax rises and how terrible the finances are, and a lot of the front pages today saying that we're going to get this rise in capital gains tax. I mean, I just think that if this happens, this will be the biggest betrayal, and all of this, honour in politics that we've been listening to them blathering on about will go all down the toilet, because they clearly knew about this before the election. So we will talk about that. Why have the Olympics deleted all the footage from the Olympic opening ceremony?
That's right, yes.
I find
it's good to see London 2012 still up there.
Yes.
That is good to see.
So I'm finding the saga about that hilarious. We'll have the political panel talking about those tax rises, and we'll talk about a few of the other stories as well. This latest video that's come out of Manchester Airport and what led up to all of this too. So we will discuss that. We'll have a bit of royals as well. We'll talk about Meghan Markle is apparently never coming back to the UK.
Jonathan knows all about Meghan and Harry.
That would be a great shame.
Give us a nugget.
I think Britain will really miss her.
Really?
She is the queen of our jam and dog treats.
Yes, absolutely. She is the Duchess dog biscuit and the deluded Duke. That's what I love to call them.
That's it.
I'm heartbroken.
I'm absolutely heartbroken as well.
So should we get a campaign to bring her back?
No. I mean, yes, that would be lovely.
Yes.
I wish I bought my black tie.
Yes. It would have been.
People will ask, where were you when you heard?
You're not appropriately dressed for this sad occasion.